Have you ever wondered if the life you're living is truly yours? What if your desires, fears, and even the way you think aren't really you at all? And if everything you believe about yourself is just a reflection of forces you've never truly seen? Would you dare to look closer? Take a moment. Think about the choices you make every day, the food you crave, the people you love, the things you avoid. Are they genuinely yours, or are they echoes, born from genetics, shaped by your upbringing, sculpted by fleeting childhood memories, the words of teachers, the gaze of society, the pain you never speak of? We say, I want this. I hate that. I'm this kind of person. But peel back each layer of that identity, slowly, gently, and what do you actually find? Where does your wanting come from? When did that hatred begin? And this person you believe yourself to be, does such a fixed, unchanging you truly exist? Or is it just a familiar illusion rehearsed so often in your mind that it begins to feel like truth? If there is no core self, no permanent I steering the ship, then what is it that drives your thoughts, your feelings, your actions? This is where the ancient teaching of dependent origination steps in, not as a doctrine to memorize, but as a mirror to truly see yourself. You see, everything you call me or mine is nothing more than a sequence of interconnected phenomena. It didn't start from one place. It doesn't end at one point. There is no single controller behind the curtain. But in that realization, something extraordinary begins to unfold. The illusion starts to crack. Dependent origination is not a religion to worship. It is a truth so simple that trying to grasp it with mere logic pulls you further away. The Buddha never claimed that all things were created by a divine being, nor did he say that life is just a random accident. He refused to cling to any extreme. Instead, he offered a truth as quiet as it is powerful. This exists because that exists. This ceases because that ceases. Just that one sentence, and suddenly the entire illusion of permanence loses its footing. Nothing is born from a single cause. Nothing stands alone. Every form, every experience, even your own body and mind, are threads woven into an endless tapestry of conditions. A single raindrop doesn't fall simply because there are clouds. It falls because of humidity, because of pressure, because of temperature, air currents, geography, and perhaps even the invisible evaporation of a water droplet from a rice field far away, one you'll never visit, even your breath. The simple act of inhaling is not just a reflex of biology. It is the end result of millions of years of evolution, of lungs that formed, of forests that breathed out oxygen, of sunrises that kissed leaves awake long before you were born. And if you look carefully within, you'll realize that there's nothing inside you that exists independently. Your thoughts didn't come from nowhere. Your emotions didn't arise in a vacuum. Even your habits, your wounds, your preferences, and this very idea that I exist, all of it was shaped by forces both outside and within, beyond your control. To understand dependent origination is to realize nothing can exist without the right conditions. What you call I is nothing more than a temporary constellation of those conditions. You are like a cloud. When the wind changes, when the moisture dissipates, the cloud disappears. But no one dies, because there was never a fixed self to begin with. This is the truth of dependent origination, and it is also the truth of non-self. If no phenomenon has an independent essence, then nothing can truly be mine. There is no me owning emotions, no me controlling life. There are only conditions, appearing, dissolving, leaving behind no trace but the quiet clarity of awareness. And from this clarity, something shifts. You stop blaming. Not your parents, not your children, not society, not even yourself. because all of it, every part, was simply a ripple in the stream of conditions. No one was in charge. No one was the villain. No one truly caused it all. If this touched something inside you, take a moment to reflect or share with someone who may need this truth today. Sometimes just understanding that we're not alone in the flow is enough. Now, with this foundation in place, let's begin to explore how this insight can reshape not just how you see yourself, but how you live moment to moment. From that moment, when blame dissolves, when self-pity fades, you step into an entirely different space, a realm untouched by ownership, a place of clear seeing, where no one is at fault and no one needs rescuing. In the teaching of dependent origination, the Buddha didn't merely lay out a neat sequence of causes and effects as if life unfolds on a straight line. He pointed directly, unflinchingly, into how suffering arises right here, right now, in the heart of human consciousness. Not in some far-off future life, not in a mystical wheel of reincarnation, but in every moment you identify, react, and cling. Each reaction, each grasping, each split second where you say, "This is mine, this is me," is a link in the chain where suffering is born. And at the root of this entire chain is something deceptively simple: not seeing, ignorance. Not in the sense of lacking knowledge, but in a deeper, more dangerous sense. A fog in the mind, a fundamental blindness to the true nature of all things. You believe that happiness comes from something out there, that suffering is someone's fault, that there's a solid you who must be defended, fulfilled, proven. But that unseeing, that misperception, is the fertile ground where every illusion takes root. From that soil, action begins. Not just outward behavior, but the subtle constructions within. You calculate, you react, you interpret, you cling to labels and meanings. You resist what is and grasp at what might be. These responses repeat. They harden into habits, and those habits become mental grooves, patterns of perception. From here, karma takes form, not as divine reward or punishment, but as the natural unfolding of seeds planted in the field of unawareness. On this foundation, a new formation arises: consciousness, but not pure awareness. This consciousness is already divided, already fractured. It says, "I see, I think, I feel." And in that split, subject and object, the illusion of a self begins to shimmer. It seems faint at first, but it feels real enough. Then form and mind begin to crystallize. This is name and form. Mind carries ingredients like emotion, memory, imagination, and intention. Body brings sensation, nerves, flesh, the capacity to experience. Together, they weave what we call the self, a being with a body, a mind, a sense of continuity. And because this self now exists, it opens gateways to engage with the world. The sixth sense bases arise: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind all become channels through which this newly formed self meets the world. Every time you see, hear, smell, taste, touch, or think, the illusion gets another chance to be reborn. From these interactions, something powerful takes shape: contact. When the senses meet with their respective objects, sight meets form, ear meets sound, and so on, and consciousness joins them, experience happens. But contact is never still. It's never neutral. It flows directly into sensation, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And the moment feeling appears, reaction begins again. These feelings, this is Vedana. You feel pleasure and want it to last. You feel pain and try to push it away. You feel emptiness and seek to fill it. It's in these small, unnoticed moments, dozens of times a day, that craving stirs. Craving is not love. It is not noble longing. It is a quiet, relentless hunger, a silent grasp that reaches out from within, whispering, "I want this. I don't want that. I need to feel in control." And from that craving, attachment is born. You no longer simply want something. You merge with it. You don't just love a person. You call them yours. You don't just enjoy success. You call it who you are. Now the ego fuses itself with experience. And just like that, a deeper layer of me is formed. The self, once again, strengthens its grip on existence. The cycle is subtle, but its momentum is vast, and it's in understanding this process, not just intellectually but viscerally, that the doorway to liberation begins to open. To truly grasp this, we must continue walking step by step through this chain of becoming. Because what happens after attachment is what gives rise to the world you suffer in. Let's explore that next. As we saw earlier, the moment you cling, you create a sense of self. And from that clinging, a new layer of being emerges, what Buddhism calls becoming. You're no longer just someone experiencing life. You become the one who was betrayed, the awakened one, the good one, the broken one, the one who must be seen, and from that identity, a conditional existence forms. A whole stream of experience begins to flow, not because it's real, but because you've given it a name. And once that becoming takes root, birth follows. But this isn't about physical birth. It's the birth of a new ego again and again. Each time you merge with a thought, an emotion, a memory, a new you is born into the moment. Each self carries its own short lifespan, its own little story. And inevitably, as with all things that begin, there is an end. Decay. Death. Not of your physical body, but of the fragile identity you just gave life to. This is what brings pain, not the loss of things, but the belief that when something disappears, you disappear with it. You suffer not because something fades, but because you believe you were that thing. But look deeper. That self was just a mental image, a reflection. You were attached to, and what's dying is not you, but an illusion. This is the full circle, from not seeing, to constructing, to becoming aware, to dividing experience, to shaping body and mind, to contact, to feeling, to craving, to grasping, to becoming, to birth, and finally, to suffering. This chain isn't a one-time event. It plays out endlessly, in every breath, in every thought, in every rising emotion. Each time you fail to see this chain, it starts again. Each time you see it clearly, it loses power. No one needs to stop it for you. No one needs to destroy it. Just seeing is enough. This is why samsara, the cycle of birth and death, is not some mythic realm far away. It is here, in the repetitive unfolding of ego, moment by moment. Most people think of samsara as a great cosmic journey. You're born. You grow old. You die. You get reborn into a new life. It's an easy image to imagine. Simple, linear, reassuring even, but it's also deeply misunderstood. The Buddha never denied the existence of those vast cycles on a cosmic scale, but in the heart of his deepest wisdom, he pointed to something far more intimate. Rebirth doesn't wait for your body to die. It happens every time you mistake a thought for yourself, every time an emotion sweeps you away. A new version of you steps into the spotlight. Anger arises. You say, "I'm angry." Suddenly, there's a new self, burning, reactive, clenched. Sadness arrives. You embrace it and say, "I'm sad." And just like that, another self has taken shape. In a single day, you may be born and die hundreds of times, but you don't notice. That is the real cycle of rebirth. The subtle mental reincarnations happening silently within you. You don't have to wait for a future life to be reborn. You're already doing it. With every character you play, with every memory you identify with every self-image you hold tight. And because of that, you're also dying again and again. Every time you're rejected, defeated, forgotten. A version of you dies, but you don't see it. You think you're living one long, continuous life, a clear line from point A to point B, one single self marching through time. But in truth, you've never lived a single moment fully. You've been too busy chasing phantom selves, birth after birth, death after death. Rebirth is not mythology. It's the psychology of the self, a delicate, subtle mechanism of the mind. It unfolds right here, in the heart. Each time you fail to see clearly, your mind assigns the label me to a thought, a feeling, a reaction, and the illusion begins again. But if you pause, if you look closely enough, you'll notice no self lasts more than a few seconds. Today, you're the failure. Tomorrow, the victor. An hour ago, you were kind. Now, you're resentful. Everything shifts, but you still believe it's all part of one continuous you. This is the root of confusion. Freedom, then, is not found in escaping some distant wheel of rebirth. It's found right here, in seeing clearly and deeply how the self is constantly being born and dying in real time. To awaken is to no longer be fooled by these subtle births, and to rest in the awareness that sees it all without clinging. And now, with this understanding deepening, we can finally begin to ask, if the self is not what I thought it was, then what remains? Let's walk into that next. As we uncovered earlier, the illusion of self is born and reborn in each moment we fail to see clearly. But when we truly see that nothing ever truly begins, then we also begin to see nothing truly needs to end. If there is no permanent I to cling to, then who is it that is being born, and who is it that needs to die? With this realization, the cycle of rebirth begins to unravel. Not through effort, not through striving for liberation, but through the quiet power of seeing. When the mind becomes still and awareness becomes spacious and whole, you begin to realize everything is simply unfolding. Nothing is being created. Nothing is being destroyed. No one is doing anything. And you, if you're no longer the observer, will begin to sense that the stage itself was never real. Dependent origination doesn't only point to how things arise, it also shows us how things fall apart. When this is, that is. When this is not, that is not. It's that simple. You don't need to destroy the ego. You don't need to fight off desire or suppress your mind. You only need to see, clearly, silently, with equanimity, just one link. And when that link breaks, the entire chain collapses. For example, if you can notice a feeling as it arises, just notice, without judgment, without reacting, not chasing it, not resisting it, then craving has no soil to grow in. And if craving doesn't arise, then there's nothing to grasp. And if there's no grasping, there's no self being rebuilt. One link falling apart causes the whole chain to dissolve. Just like a circle of links, remove one, and the loop no longer holds. But this kind of seeing isn't born from theory. It's not something you memorize from a book. It doesn't live in your mind. It arises from direct, vivid presence, from the raw clarity of a mind that no longer reacts. Habitually, a heart that no longer clings to interpretation or comparison. This is why the Buddha walked the path of insight meditation, vipassana, not to attain a peaceful state, but to see clearly, to observe the arising and passing of all things, to see how name and form move, to watch the mind rise and fall, to feel emotion surge and disappear without anyone controlling any of it. And in that seeing, ignorance has nowhere left to hide, And when ignorance fades, so do all the other links: formation, consciousness, name, and form, all the way down. Freedom doesn't arrive like a grand awakening. It doesn't feel like being shaken from a dream. It's more like a lamp going out, not because someone blew it out, but because there is no more fuel to keep it burning. In the same way, suffering ends not because it was fought and defeated, but because it is no longer being fed by ignorance, by attachment, by the illusion of I. When this seeing takes root, letting go is no longer an effort. It simply happens. No one is trying to let go, but things fall away on their own. There is no one renouncing anything, but nothing sticks to you anymore. It's like a man holding a burning rope. The moment he sees the fire, he drops it. Not out of discipline, not out of willpower, but because that's what happens when you truly see. At that point, freedom is no longer about doing what you want. It's not the freedom to satisfy desire. It's the freedom from the entire machinery of wanting, freedom from the endless loop between craving and suffering, a kind of freedom that belongs to no one, because the one who would be liberated no longer exists. What remains is silence, a spacious clarity, a reality untouched by form, a peace that cannot be possessed because there is no one left to claim. And here lies the deepest gift of dependent origination. It points not just to the nature of suffering, but to the truth of non-self. The Buddha saw that every phenomenon, in both mind and body, arises only because conditions allow it to. And in that realization, the very idea of a fixed independent self begins to dissolve, just as a wave exists only because of wind, water, and motion. Your identity too is just a momentary appearance, not something that belongs to you, but something that appears when the conditions are right and fades when they are not. And that insight brings us one step closer to the deepest letting go of all. Because once you truly see the nature of non-self, what is left to hold on to? Let's enter that space together in the next reflection. As we approached in the last reflection, once the illusion of self falls away, what remains is not absence, but reality, seen clearly, untouched by clinging. When the independent self dissolves completely, there's no longer any foundation to claim. This is me. This belongs to me. This is my identity. Yet most of us live as if such a self exists. We assume there is a permanent I who owns experience, who stands behind thoughts, who steers emotions, who reacts to the world like a driver behind the wheel. But if you look closely, you'll begin to see something very different. Everything is simply unfolding, moment by moment, as the result of countless conditions. No one sits at the center of the flow. A feeling arises because the body makes contact with its surroundings. A thought emerges because memory, environment, and mental triggers align. An emotion swells because of patterns laid down long ago. Nowhere in this process can you find a fixed self to place in the middle. Non-self doesn't mean you vanish. It doesn't mean you become numb or lifeless. It simply means you finally see. There is no solid, unchanging entity living this life. What you call I is just a bundle of shifting parts, a collection of form, sensation, perception, intention, and awareness, arising and interacting in real time. And none of these parts, by themselves or together, can truthfully be called me. When conditions come together, experience appears. When conditions fade, the experience disappears. There is no doer of birth and no victim of death, just the unfolding and unraveling of causes and effects. And because there is no one to possess pain, there is also no one to be consumed by it. You may still feel discomfort, but there is no longer a self trapped inside that pain. You may still experience sadness, but it no longer has a home to settle in. no me to carry it as an identity. The greatest suffering isn't the sensation itself. It's the deep misbelief that I am the one who is suffering. That thought, I am suffering, is the root of the cycle, the seed of rebirth. The ego placing itself at the center of every experience. But once dependent origination is seen, clearly you realize you don't have to destroy the self or try to let go of anything at all. You just have to see, honestly and without bias, that everything is arising and fading according to conditions. And none of it is you. When this seeing becomes stable, then even if thoughts arise, even if sensations move through the body, even if emotions ripple through the heart, you are no longer fooled into believing that someone is experiencing them, and that shift changes everything. It doesn't make you cold or hollow. It returns you to the natural state of presence, a silent awareness that sees without grabbing, where things come and go and leave no trace behind. Life continues to move, but it doesn't need a controller. This isn't a mystical state. It's not rare or elite. It's the most intimate reality, simply obscured by the illusion of a self squeezing itself into the center. And when that illusion falls, so too does the idea that suffering is a problem. Because if there's no one to suffer, then pain becomes. Like the sound of rain, it falls, then fades. It doesn't need to be resisted. It doesn't need to be endured. It simply passes through. And when suffering is seen this way, liberation is no longer something you attain. It's something that happens when there's no longer anyone left to be bound. And it is precisely at that point that awakened wisdom begins to blossom. Not because it seeks something, not because it tries to achieve, but because the conditions that once created and fueled the ego have lost their power. No one sees dependent origination, but dependent origination continues to operate regardless. That's the paradox. The moment you say, "I see it now," that very statement already distorts the seeing. The eye has slipped back in, like a shadow contaminating light. The witness inserts itself again, and the purity of perception is compromised. Because real seeing belongs to no one. There is no seer. There is no owner of the experience. Dependent origination does not require a self to observe it. It unfolds naturally, moment by moment, in every mental formation, in every flicker of sensation, in every rise and fall of thought. It is already here, already functioning, already complete. You only need to stop claiming it, and perhaps the most radical truth of all is this. When you stop searching for the one who sees, the seeing becomes complete on its own. So the question now arises, if no one is truly here to suffer, possess, or control, then what exactly is freedom? Let's turn toward that final truth in the next reflection. In the previous reflection, we saw how the self dissolves when no one remains to claim experience. And now we step into the stillness that follows, where even the urge to understand begins to fall away. The insight into dependent origination isn't something you memorize. It isn't a set of terms or a collection of knowledge. It doesn't live in analysis, and it certainly doesn't reveal itself through rote recitation of the 12 links. It only shows itself in silence, when you stop trying to grasp it. When you no longer chase enlightenment like a destination, it reveals itself the moment you let go of trying to see and simply witness life unfolding on its own. Each time you notice a link in the chain of reaction, just see it. Don't interfere, don't interpret, just be still with it. And with that simple stillness, the illusion of a self begins to crack, quietly, without drama. You don't have to wait for a grand awakening. You don't have to search for that one breakthrough moment. You just need to recognize how each loop of the cycle rises, spins, and dissolves without a controller, without a burden bearer. This dissolving is so subtle it makes no sound. There's no victorious moment, No triumphant milestone, no bells ringing. It's so gentle, so unremarkable. You may believe nothing is happening at all. But that nothing, that absence of achievement, of ownership, of someone attaining anything, is in truth the deepest freedom there is. You don't need to become an enlightened person. You don't need to polish your mind until it shines. You don't need to reach some extraordinary state. You only need to see that every effort to become something is born from a self that never really existed. And once you truly see this, you no longer need to awaken, because there was never anyone asleep. You no longer need to liberate, because no one was ever bound. You no longer need to end suffering, because there is no one suffering. All that remains is life, moving without resistance, flowing without grasping, and at the heart of this unforced, rhythm is a piece that no one created and no one owns. Dependent origination is not a doctrine to believe in. It's not a philosophical puzzle to debate. It is a mirror. And when you stand in front of it honestly, it reflects the truth. There has never been a you behind the glass. Everything is simply happening, conditioned and unconditioned, rising and falling, because the conditions allow it to be so. And when those conditions are no longer sustained, what you call the self vanishes, like a cloud dispersing into a wind that no longer holds it. Freedom isn't somewhere ahead of you. It's not waiting for you beyond effort or tucked behind struggle. It is right here, in the quiet clarity that sees there is nothing to fix, no one to rescue, no path that must be walked. There is only presence, luminous and free, not held by anyone, not lost by anyone. And if anything remains after everything else has fallen away, it is not understanding, it is not insight, it is a presence no longer bound by the idea of insight, a wisdom that has no name, a knowing that needs no knower, a vision that no longer stands anywhere at all. So if you've listened this far, thank you, not as a student, not as a seeker, but as awareness, gently turning its gaze inward, meeting itself again. May we meet again, not in a grand temple or rare moment, but in the ordinary seconds between breaths, in the gentle unfolding of dishes washed, footsteps walked, and life lived without a self behind it. For in those quiet moments, dependent origination is still unfolding. Only now, you are no longer the one being unfolded.